Today we are setting the record straight when it comes to these very similar design styles that people often mistake for the exact same thing. On my channel, I love breaking down different design styles, especially when it comes to mixing many different types of design styles. But sometimes I do find somebody might label themselves as a boho girly, even though boho is not necessarily the same as bohemian. So in this video, I want to go through some of these very similar styles and a few of the differences that really make up each one and why they are two separate and very different styles. We actually have 5 examples of this that I'm going to be going through today, but if you have a very particular set of styles that you're interested in, definitely let me know down in the comments if you want me to include them in more of a deep dive video like this one here. So the very first example, which I mentioned already, is boho interiors versus bohemian interiors. The two terms are often used almost interchangeably. However, bohemian interiors is a little bit more of the traditional kind of free-spirited, eclectic decor style. And boho has a little bit more of a modern, trendy flair. Overall, these two looks are not even in the same category. I find both of them to be very different styles in your home. And if you haven't guessed already, I am obviously a fan of the bohemian style. I just find this to be so much more authentic and almost more of like a traditional look in your home, where boho is almost just a little bit more girly. It's a little more trendy, kind of fairy tale-esque. I don't find this to be a long-term style you want to be incorporating in your home, as it is very trendy and probably it is going to be out of style. In my opinion, it is already kind of on its way out, so that's why I'm just not a huge fan of the kind of modern boho aesthetic. Bohemian interiors are a lot more maximalist. There's just a lot of collecting that goes on in these interiors. Often this is a home that's filled with a lifetime of trinkets and knickknacks and photographs, and that's why I love it so much. It's just filled with so much character and personality, but I will say some people do find this style to be a little bit overwhelming, which is probably why boho gained so much popularity over the past decade or so. This is a lot more simplified version of the bohemian style. It's a little bit more minimalistic. Often tones are a little bit more muted. There's not as much kind of a splash of color. And though modern boho does still include small trinkets and little knickknacks and accessories, I don't find them to be as curated and collected. This style really is one that you can go to HomeSense, you can go to Walmart, you can pick items off of the shelf and it's going to be within this decor style, where bohemian is very hard to go out and shop from a big box store. If you were buying new pieces, you really would be looking out for kind of those oddball items, those things that are really going to stick out when you're at the store, where modern boho is just very generic. Often you can get away with kind of a very plain Jane chair, but maybe you're throwing kind of a tassel-y pillow on it. So in my opinion, that modern boho is almost just a little bit more easy to cheat the style than a true, very classic and curated bohemian space would be. The other thing about boho interiors is they're almost kind of Instagram chic. For so long, there was just lots of influencers and YouTubers where you could tell their space was just the epitome of a boho space. For example, there were so many people online who actually painted those boho archways. Now I feel like nobody is putting these in their homes. Lots of people are painting over these. And sadly, I feel like lots of little restaurants and cafes also went into this more boho style aesthetic. And actually Paige Wassel featured this in her latest kind of restaurant decor video, where lots of restaurants and cafes overcommitted to this style in their design as well. Where in my opinion, if more people had actually just gone down the rabbit hole of more of a bohemian take, this would actually have lasted so much longer in their homes or restaurants, where it would have been a much more unique and personality-filled space. I also love that bohemian is just a little bit more relaxed. It doesn't take itself as seriously. When you're working with a boho space, everything has to be just so. The color palette really has to coordinate. All of the finishes feel like they also have to coordinate. Where bohemian interiors, pretty much anything goes. You never feel pigeonholed into this style. When you're out shopping or you're out thrifting and you find something that really speaks to you, it's super easy to actually incorporate with your space because you're not taking it that seriously. The next two styles that I commonly see being mixed up is Scandinavian and Nordic interiors. In my opinion, what most people would consider Scandinavian interiors, I find actually to be a little bit more Nordic. These would be just very minimalist spaces that have a lot of focus on those lighter toned woods. Maybe everything is a little bit more utilitarian. There's just not as much personality and character. For the most part, the actual design of a Nordic home is going to lay heavily in the textures and materials used, where in my opinion, Scandinavian is actually more of that kind of Danish interior. Usually there's a little bit more influence from things like mid-century modern or retro design. Scandinavian spaces often highly emphasize warmth and lighting. Generally, there's a lot of candlelight, pendant fixtures, lamp lighting. I really love this aspect of a Scandinavian space. And a Nordic home still embraces that and embodies that, but I find overall things, again, are going to feel quite simplistic. And while both styles really emphasize and embody the idea of using genuine and natural materials, I do find Scandinavian interiors tend to be knocked off in a lot of ways. You always see this with big box stores or fast furniture companies. They make kind of a dupe for a Scandinavian item, when in reality, this kind of goes against all of the principles for either Scandinavian or Nordic interiors. These styles really are best achieved if you are using genuine materials, especially if you're into more of that Scandinavian look. I would really shop secondhand for some mid-century modern pieces. This is really what's going to nail this look in your home, and it's not going to feel as cheap and trendy. And to give you a little bit more understanding of that true Nordic style, I personally would almost categorize this as more of that ski chalet feeling. This is where you're getting into lots of that wood furniture. It's almost like everything in the room feels like it's just drenched in that wood finish. Even if you are looking at a room that has very tall ceilings and lots of windows, the finishes and the materials are really going to kind of close the room and make it feel just very warm and cozy. And if you are into the idea of a Scandinavian home, the other thing that I love about this style is there is a little bit more of a lifestyle that goes with it. The entire concept of a warm Scandinavian space is the idea that when you're in your home, you're gathering with people, you're inviting people in, you're sharing conversations, you're enjoying good food, playing games. Really, these spaces embody that feeling of connection, as well as the concept of slow living. This is why so many Scandinavian pieces are very well made, and they're made of solid wood or genuine materials. It's because the idea is that you would buy this piece one time and you would keep it for the rest of your life, instead of having fast furniture that you're constantly cycling through in your home. Next up, we have mid-century modern versus retro. Mid-century modern is just that classic style that everybody knows and loves. I will say this one has become pretty trendy in recent years. So again, if you do love this style, I would always recommend purchasing secondhand or finding items that are genuinely mid-century modern, as opposed to getting kind of that fast furniture dupe instead. And because so many people love the authentic look of a mid-century modern space, I think this is sometimes where the confusion comes in with retro. While a retro space could incorporate different elements from the mid-century modern era, it also is going to incorporate elements from the 80s, the 70s, even the 90s. Not only does a retro space match up many different eras and decades of design, I also find it to have many different layers of things like materials and colors. Usually it's going to be a lot more playful and have just so much uniqueness and personality. Each retro space is really going to reflect the personality and the interests of the person that decorated it. And because each piece is either vintage or collected, this is also going to add to the uniqueness of the home as well. Something that I personally prefer when it comes to mid-century modern interiors is they tend to feel just a little more softer and warm. I also find that a mid-century modern space overall feels a little more unified. Everything tends to match a little bit better. Tones usually are not going to be as contrasty contrasting as they are in a retro home. And while the actual vintage era of mid-century modernism would have incorporated a lot more pops of color and pattern, I find the more modern take of mid-century modern right now tends to be a little bit more laid back. It's a little bit more of a casual style, and I often find it has more of an earthy feel to it as well. For instance, lots of people will actually layer mid-century modern interiors with organic interiors. This is really going to give you just a very casual and earthy feeling in your home, and generally that's kind of going to give you that warm and welcoming feeling in your space that a retro space just almost is very hard to achieve with. And because a true retro space can feel quite chaotic, I actually find it pairs so well with mid-century modern. This is where you really could commit to more of a mid-century modern look in your home, but still incorporate many different elements from different decades where you're having those bursts and pops of uniqueness and personality, where overall the rest of your home is going to feel quite warm and welcoming. Next pairing is country versus cottage interiors. First and foremost, country really does pull from more of that farmhouse aesthetic. Things here are going to feel just a little bit more little house on the prairie. And that could be through influences like Southwestern style, even equestrian or provincial style as well. Country spaces really embody these different styles nicely. It could be through using Southwestern accents in the textiles and maybe equestrian elements in things like artwork or accessories. I also find country materials to be a lot more rustic in nature. Wood is usually going to have just a little bit more of a patina finish to it. Same thing with leathers. These are going to have, marks and shaping in a leather sofa, where a cottage interior is going to feel just a little more cutesy and soft, almost like you're living in a storybook home. I also find a cottage interior tends to layer lots of different types of patterns. It's not uncommon to see things like a gingham, floral, or stripes in these homes, as well as frilly elements. Things like cafe curtains or ruffles, even slip cover furniture is just very nicely done in a cottage home, where farmhouse is just a little bit more functional and classic. Things really feel a lot more relaxed and laid back. There's just not as much muss and fuss when it comes to a country interior. And because cottage homes are a little bit more whimsical and romantic, I do find incorporating fun pops of color or pattern in something like a wallpaper is another great way to go. And while both styles feel very rustic, I do find that if you are looking to add more refined elements, this is actually better suited in a cottage interior. Sometimes when you start trying to add these into more of a country home, this is where you're going to elevate it into more of that provincial feeling instead. And I will say both of these styles can start to feel just a little one track if you are using them in your home. So I do find a fresh way of pairing these in your home is going to be by adding some modern elements to make it feel just a little bit more fresh. And our next pairing is a coastal versus a nautical. Again, these styles are very similar and there's a lot of overlap between them, where coastal I find to be just a little bit more light and airy and kind of that casual, relaxing feeling, where nautical is almost a little bit more historical. This would be incorporating artifacts and elements that you would actually find from a home in a coastal region. And with that being said, nautical homes, in my opinion, sometimes I feel like can come off a little bit themey, where coastal is a little bit more of an authentic and natural way of achieving a very similar style to this in your home, but it doesn't feel like it's so on the nose. Coastal uses very soft and natural tones. Generally speaking, that color palette is going to be very light and neutral, where I do find that nautical tends to lean in a little bit more to those dark and moody tones, which sometimes can be nice if you want to add a little bit of depth into your coastal interior. Other nautical elements that are nice to include in your coastal interior are some of the patterns. I just find nautical things like stripes and ropes are great accents to add into your coastal interior. This is because a coastal home can sometimes feel a little neutral and bland, so by spicing it up with some of these more patterned and textured elements can be a great way to go. Nautical interiors really do have kind of that maritime feeling to them, so I do do find by incorporating and infusing some of these more classic coastal elements, this can help lighten up the space and not feel so serious and historical. And something that I do love about a nautical space is the idea that you can incorporate different pops of contrasting colors. I think this is such a fun look in any home, but I find we see this a lot less in coastal interiors. So if you do lean into that nautical feeling a little bit more in your coastal home, it does actually give you some leniency to be able to add some of these more contrasting shades. And while I'm a big fan of incorporating different nautical elements, I will say sometimes it can go too far. Personally, I am not a big fan of homes that are just literally themed with nautical items. This is where your home can start to feel a little bit more like a beach Airbnb, as opposed to your space that should be filled with your own personality and character. And the great thing about both of these styles is they do place a lot of emphasis when it does come to using very natural materials. Things like linen slip covers, jute rugs, even rattan blinds. These are all just really wonderful elements that are going to warm up your home, as well as giving it kind of that nice casual feeling. And if coastal and nautical is your vibe when it comes to interior design, one pitfall that I do find lots of people fall into is only using light wood furniture. I do find both of these styles actually do incorporate a lot of darker shades of wood that lots of people tend to forget. So in my opinion, the best way of using this style is going to be layering in many different shades of wood, many different textures and materials, as well as those nautical influences that are actually going to give it pops of personality and character in the space as well. So there you have it. While these styles can look very similar at a glance, once you actually do a deep dive, you can really see just how different these styles really are. So I hope this video helped to clear up any confusion you had regarding some of these styles, and maybe it helped you pinpoint which one you actually prefer. So let me know down in the comments which one of these styles was your favorite, and if you have a style you want me to deep dive further, definitely let me know there as well. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and maybe share this with somebody who needs a little design clarity of their own. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.